Hello, it's nice to see you for another story time. Today Grandma's going to read a story about bears. Are you sitting comfortably, ready for bedtime story? This story is called The Trouble with Edward. Where's that bear? Roared Mr. Teddington from the garage. Someone, and I think I know who, has filled my boots with mud. Edward put his head around the garage door and tried to explain. I was trying to start a wormery, Dad. We've been learning about worms at school. But your boots weren't very good because I couldn't see through them. Oh, excuse me, said his father. Next time I'll buy boots with windows in them. Come here at once and clean out these boots. Edward crept into the garage and took away the offending boots. He was in trouble again. It didn't seem to matter what he did, someone was always mad at him. Even if he was trying to do something helpful, it always seemed to go wrong. Edward, what are you doing? Cried his mother. I'm cleaning Dad's boots, said Edward. On the living room carpet? Take those boots outside right now. And when you've finished them, you can come right back and clear this mess up. Edward picked up the boots and walked slowly outside. He felt sad and unloved. As he carried the boots upside down, more mud fell out in little heaps behind him. Mrs. Teddington flopped down into a chair with a gasp. What are we going to do with that bear? Mr. and Mrs. Teddington had an emergency meeting in the garage. It's not that he's a bad little bear, said his mother. He just doesn't ever think about what he's doing. He was very kind to you when you had a cold last month. He made that cocoa all by himself and brought it upstairs ever so carefully without spilling a drop. That was so he could spill the whole mug over my bed, cried Mr. Teddington. Never mind the cold, I nearly drowned. Well, I think the problem is that he doesn't have an older bear to look up to and copy. I thought we could invite my friend Violet and her little boy Billy to stay with us. 2 boys in the house? Mr. Teddington shuddered. But he remembered Billy handing out hymn books very quietly at Mrs. Teddington's sister's wedding, and so he agreed. As soon as Billy arrived in the house, Mr. and Mrs. Teddington felt sure they'd done the right thing. Billy was clean and polite, but more important, he was thoughtful. After supper, Billy would say, May I help with the washing up, Mrs. Teddington? I'll just go and put on my apron. Billy washed Mr. Teddington's car and polished it so that you could see yourself in it. And he saved the rinsing water for Mrs. Teddington's plants. Waste not, want not, said Billy cheerfully. He's having a very good effect on Edward, whispered Mrs. Teddington to her husband. He's such a sensible little bear. Although sometimes I think he is just a little bit too good. It's not quite natural somehow. Let's make the most of it, said her husband. He's going home the day after to tomorrow. It had been a week without major accidents of any kind. Yes, Edward had somehow dropped his cereal into the toaster, but Billy had cleaned out the cereal and a lot of crumbs in the bottom. A toaster can be dangerous if you don't decrumb it regularly, Mr. Teddington, he said. On Billy's last day, the whole family went for a picnic down by the river. Somehow Billy's presence made the whole thing rather quieter than picnics usually were. Why don't you go and play with Billy, Edward, said his parents when they had all eaten. We're a little too near the riverbank for safety, said Billy. One false step and a dangerous situation could occur. Oh, nonsense, said Mr. Teddington. Let's go and look for frogs. In no time at all, he and Edward were crawling along the bank. Billy stood a little further back. Your knees are getting very muddy, he warned, and grass staining is difficult to remove. What was that, Billy? Asked Mr. Teddington, looking over his shoulder for a moment. Ooh, splash! Edward's dad had fallen into the water. At once there was uproar. He can't swim, yelled Mrs. Teddington. Somebody do something. Dad, cried Edward, I'll save you, and he plunged into the water. I shall stay safely away from the edge, said Billy calmly. People are often drowned trying to save someone. It would be sensible not to go closer. But Mr. Teddington climbed out of the river with Edward in his arms. He had a broad smile on his face. In case you hadn't noticed, Billy, he said, the water only came up to my knees. And before you say it, I know accidents can happen even in shallow water. But Edward is a very good swimmer, and there are things that are more important than being sensible. I'm very proud of Edward. Edward snuggled closer in his father's arms as his mother gave them both a big hug, not minding that she was getting very wet herself. There wasn't any need to worry, smiled Mr. Teddington. I wasn't really worried, said his wife, especially now I can see exactly where Edward gets his Edwardness from. And that's the end of the story about Edward the Bear. I hope you liked that one. We did. Okay. Sleep well. Good night. See you again soon for another story time. Night night.